Alexander Tcherepnin was born in St. Petersburg, Russia on January 21, 1899. His father was a well-known composer who had studied with the great Rimsky-Korsakov. Tcherepnin matured to become a pianistic composer. His music was light and flowing, which allowed his expressionism to grow, which is a contrast from most Russian composers, which followed the heavier sound through composed and lieder style of music. The Opus 5 Bagatelles were a huge step for Tcherepnin as they were published before he entered the Petrograd Conservatory or had any formal training with any school. With all the turmoil in Russia during the 1910s and 1920s, where Georgia, the immigrant Russians, and the USSR were all fighting for power and expanding their borders, the musical centers disappeared. Because of this, Tcherepnin and his family traveled often, from Constantinople to his eventual love, China and Japan. He moved to Paris and studied at the Paris Conservatory in the late teens and early 20s. In 1926, Tcherepnin married the American socialite Louisine Weeks. Their marriage lasted about 10 years. They met because Tcherepnin traveled between North America, Europe, and Asia. He lived in New York temporarily, where he created new music and traveled to Europe for tours and operas. Tcherepnin first traveled and toured in Egypt, Palestine, and Greece in 1931. From there, he felt the urge to tour the Far East, touring in 1934 to China, Japan, Singapore, India, and Palestine. China was especially important to Tcherepnin. From trinkets that a friend's wife had brought back from her travels and his tour in Egypt, where he started to combine the Eastern music with the Western music of Russia. It was in Shanghai where he met his second wife, Li Hsong-ming, who was one of 4 people to graduate from the new conservatory built in Shanghai. He stayed in the Orient for many years. There he learned much about the culture, what they wanted to learn, and what he could learn from them. The Oriental people were very interested in Western music, so some of the pieces that Tcherepnin wrote were for the Oriental people, which combined the Eastern music and Western music. Other pieces Tcherepnin wrote were for the European and American cultures. He wrote concerts for these people which had Oriental influences with their music. When he was 33, he moved to the Orient, where he not only furthered his own career, but also promoted the careers of other Oriental composers. He founded his own publishing house in Tokyo for that purpose. He married the Chinese pianist Li Hsong-ming in 1938. He moved back to Paris in 1939. He managed to survive World War II by publishing music. In 1949, he moved to the United States, first accepting a position at DePaul University in downtown Chicago as a teacher of theory. His wife was also invited to join the faculty. He became a citizen of the U.S. in 1958. In 1964, he moved to New York City. Many of his works include those for orchestra, ballet, chamber groups, chorus, opera, and piano solo. He had 3 sons, 2 of which went into the field of electronic music. The field of electronic music was very interesting to Tcherepnin. He knew he would never live long enough to truly enjoy it, but his interest in it left his mark on his sons. Tcherepnin's life was more involved in experimental writing than many people realize. He was a musical innovator and even created a new scale that today bears his name. The scale contains 9 tones rather than the usual 7. Tcherepnin commonly used this scale in a D and is sometimes considered a major-minor scale. It starts off with a half step, whole step, and a half step again. This pattern is repeated 3 times. In an entry Tcherepnin wrote in his diary about his creation of Interpoint, "As opposed to Impressionism, which was considered vanguard in the teens of the century, I searched for clarity in my compositions and still do today. I already feel that polyphony was a means of writing pretentious saccharinage quantities and homophonic fogginess. Gradually my own type of polyphony, which I call interpoint, was developed. In contrast to classical counterpoint, which was note against note, interpoint has note between note. Interpoint can be vertical, i.e. truly note between note, or horizontal, where the bar line is different in each voice. It can also be aristotically mixed by carrying the duration of the contrapunctual phrases in different voices. The 9-step scale, interpoint, clarity, consciousness of form. These were my musical baggage, my musical credo." Alexander Tcherepnin, 1921. Oriental influences were also understandably strong in his writing. His Chinese Bagatelles, Opus 51, No. 3, are a prime example. Alexander Tcherepnin passed away in Paris on September 29, 1977, after many heart attacks finally took their toll. He knew his death was imminent. In a diary entry wrote in late 1976, "The time has come for me to visit Beethoven." His contribution to the Russian heritage was some of the greatest of all Russian composers. He believed that heritage of the past was something alive, important, and precious, especially Russian art. His feelings of music and humanity were also very strong. In a short autobiography Tcherepnin wrote, "The war came, and what I, like most of humanity, lived through could not help but influence my art. Everything seemed so small in comparison. With the tragedy and suffering that the war brought to everyone, it was no longer possible to think of art for art's sake or seek refuge in operating with folklore. The most important goal for the composer seemed to now serve humanity, to help unite people by works, to bring understanding, beauty, and balance to shaken minds. Alexander Tcherepnin. The pentatonic scale is common in Oriental music for its wholesome qualities. It contains no fourths or sevenths, so the consequent minor seconds, major sevenths, and tritones are not found. Some of our most basic songs use the pentatonic scale. This example of O Susanna shows that the only notes being played are in a C major pentatonic scale: C, D, E, G, and A. This basic scale is used in some of America's most cherished music, and without it, the jazz world and many other musical worlds would have never reached the height that they did. The Opus 5 Bagatelles were a dedication to Maika Kalamakarova. The pieces were meant as gifts written between 1913 and 1919. These works show the beginning of Tcherepnin's interest in the Orient. There were 10 bagatelles in the Opus 5 collection. These works have been greatly criticized because they follow no clear form from one bagatelle to the next. His later works do follow a more clear form. In the movement Allegro Marsalm, the tempo is very fast. The use of controlled dissonance is common. There is also some use of the pentatonic scale and chromaticism, which will later become part of the 9-tone scale that Tcherepnin created. The work is in C minor and 16 measures long. It is in 2/4 time. The first 5 measures start off bold and brilliant, followed by 4 measures of controlled dissonance and startling dynamics. The next 5 measures are a repeat of the beginning, and the last 2 measures are another idea on the first 5 measures. The main run in the last 2 measures follows an E-flat pentatonic scale. The range of the last 2 measures reaches the highest C and the lowest C on the keyboard. This piece ends on a C unison, which is of the Oriental idea of perfection. What can be inferred about these bagatelles is that Tcherepnin is wanting to push the edges of what everyone else is already composing. Some of the more Oriental sounds are now being discovered. Opus 51 is a 3-piece set titled Étude des pianos sur la gamme pentatonique, and often referred to as Tcherepnin's Chinese bagatelles. The first pieces are meant for learning the pentatonic scale for the beginner. The second pieces are slightly more difficult. The third pieces are 12 bagatelles. Each bagatelle is dedicated for an individual person. The first 10 are for 10 students that performed his Opus 5 bagatelles for him. One is for the student's teacher, and one is for Tcherepnin's teacher of the Chinese instrument, the plaba. These pieces were written in 1934 while Tcherepnin was in China. The number 12 bagatelle is dedicated to C.T. Yang. The tempo is moderate and played in F major pentatonic. Throughout the piece, the meter changes from cut time, 2/4 time, to 3/4 time, then back to cut time. The dynamics contrast each other very quickly, commonly going from very loud to very quiet. The piece is 50 measures long and divided into 3 sections, A, B, A. The first section maintains clarity of voice to ensure the purity of the pentatonic scale and contrasts itself in the bass line by alternating measures of staccato with slurs. The melody is simple, running up and down the pentatonic scale. In the second section, there is a sense of urgency as the tempo gets faster. Most of the notes are clustered together, which clearly distinguishes this section from the first. The sound is sparse and simplistic. The third section is a shortened version of the first section, and ends with both ideas from the first and second section, with a cluster note in the bass and unison Fs in the upper octave. Opus 95, titled Seven Chinese Folk Songs, is a collection of traditional Chinese folk music for either singer or bass and piano accompaniment. The pieces are written out at request for Yi Kuelzai and premiered in 1962. These works took 7 years to compose because of Tcherepnin's heart attack in 1955, which delayed the last 5 pieces to be written. The pieces have 2 titles. One title is descriptive of the song, and the other is of a province of China where the song came from. All but one of the pieces are in 2/4 time, and the one exception is in 4/4 time. These pieces are one of the highlights of his works as they are sung in Chinese, but written out to look as if they were in Italian. It is also interesting that some of these songs are love songs. The sung part is written out for the tenor. In the song titled West River Moon, or Kwai Chi, the meter is in 2/4 with a relatively slow tempo. There are a total of 147 measures, and all markings of dynamics, tempo, and accidentals are very clearly written out. This piece is based in G major. In the first 15 measures, Tcherepnin's idea of interpoint is used, where he has quarter note triplets over eighth notes and quintuplet and septuplets over eighth notes. These first measures function as an introduction. The singer is accompanied by a vast range of notes that span the entire length of the keyboard, going from the lowest A to the highest C. The rhythmic values of the keyboard are sparse when the singer is singing, and lyrical when the singer is preparing to sing. The overall form of this piece is modified strophic with a repeating A section creating A, where in the second there is a key change, but the minor difference in the melody cannot force a new section to come about. Each section of this piece where the singer sings is 38 measures long. The sung part is of great interest to singers. Instead of words, the voice does humming, and the spoken Chinese language, which sounds much different than Western languages, creates sounds that are truly remarkable. Almost everything about this piece is of the Orient. The few things that aren't are the fact that it's written in Western notation, and the idea that this is a love song is also of the Western tradition.